And das is va'adam yada eschava. It's lashon hiskashrus v'ischabrus. You become connected. So there was one of the chassidim, the Rashbatz, he gave a mashal. And he said that there was once a melamed, a teacher, who was hired by a yeshuvnik. There were Jews who had inns, and they didn't have an infrastructure of a community. So they would hire a teacher for their children. Because they didn't have their yeshiva or a cheder. They lived far away. They had an inn, a krechma in Poland or Ukraine. So they had these malamdim they would hire to come between Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkot. And, they would come for a few months, and then they would go home. They would teach their children. So he said there was a yeshuvnik, there was a Jew who had an inn, and he didn't know how to read anything. He was an illiterate person. He was a fine erlich yida yirei shemayim. And he had a malamed that he hired to teach his children, and he would also read his letters for him, because he could read. So once there was a letter, and this yid, the malamed, starts reading the letter for the yeshuvnik. And he's reading the letter. In the middle of the letter, the man who owned the krechma, the yeshuvnik, faints. What happened? The letter was written, the news that his father passed away. So the teacher was reading it, the Malamed, and this man fainted. So the Rashbatz asked, not Rashbatz, Reb Michal the Alter, he was one of the Mashpiyim and Lubavitch, he said, I don't understand. Who read the letter? Not the Yeshuvnik, the Malamed. He should have fainted. He's the one who had access to the information. The other one just heard it Klei Sheni from him. Why did the teacher not faint? So he said, "Was nicht sein Tate." He's reading a letter, he's close, he has more information, he could read every word. The only way the other person accesses it is through him. So he said there's two ways people could learn Torah and two ways people to learn Chassidus. One is like the teacher, they're reading a letter and they know and they analyze it and they master it. It's not talking to me. It's not my father. It's not my father. It's not my mother. It's not my soul. It's not me. It's beautiful ideas. He says, then it remains that way. It remains abstract. The way a person learns is a way, it's mine. It's mine. It's me. This is describing who I am. It's me. It's really, really me. The whole Chassidus is trying to tell you who you are, not who somebody else is. It's not about a tzaddik or about some great neshama who knew how to do miracles. It's about you. It's about me. And me here right now, right here, right now. Dide betachtoinim. For this you say, Ashreinu matov chalkeinu, the schus. And those who were zoiche to learn have now the privilege to give it to others. Not only through learning, but through experience. I once heard from the Yisrael Friedman. Actually, I heard from my brother, heard from Yisrael Friedman. There was a famous chasana, it's called the Zlobene chasana. This is an edel and a very deep story. So, if you don't have edelkeit and depth, you're not going to understand it. It's not a Rebbe story. It's not, internet. It's not one of these mamoshes. It's a edel maisa. There was a Zlobene chasana, the Zlobene chasana. You heard of the Zlobene chasana? Zlobene is a city in Ukraine. It's midway between Barditchev and Liadi. In Tovkov Samach Zayin, 1807, there was a chasana. The Alter Rebbe's granddaughter married Rebbe Levitzek of Barditchev's grandson. The Mittler Rebbe had a daughter. Rebbe Levitzek of Barditchev had a son. His name was Reb Meir, and he actually passed away a year before the wedding. I think Tovkov Samach Vav. So the father wasn't at the wedding, but the Zayder, the Barditchev Rav, was there for his Einikol. So you had the Alter Rebbe came to the wedding, and the Barditchev came to the wedding. There were two Zayders, and many others came to the wedding. I think also the Chernobyl Magid, I think also maybe came to the wedding. And all the Chassidim came, side from Barditchev, side from Liadi, because they knew the Barditchev was going to be there, the Alter Rebbe was going to be there. Was Parshas Nosei Tovkov Samach Zayin, I believe. The wedding was Friday. They actually got married on Friday. And there were many Maimorim, the Alter Rebbe said at the wedding, and many are printed. Look at the Torah Shir Hashirim, Ketzad Meraktin Lifnei Hakala. We learned it once, is from then. Maimorim of Nosei, from that chasana. The Alter Rebbe had an avas nefesh to Rebbe Levitzek of Barditchev. He loved Rebbe Levitzek. They loved each other. They knew each other from the Maggid. They were both students of the Maggid. And they had a tremendous ava. To the point that in one of the Maimorim, that was, look at the Torah, at the end of the Maimor, the Alter Rebbe said, Was Malach Michal, and the Rebbe Barditchev was there at the chasana. He said, Was Malach Michal is Lamaila, is Rebbe Levitzek Barditchev Lamata. Whatever the Malach Michal is there, Levitzek Barditchev is here. Something of that lush. When he was arrested, when the Alter Rebbe was arrested after Sukkot, Tovkuf Nun Tes, so he sent a pidyon to the Rebbe Yitzchak Baditchev and to the Menachem Chernobyler. When the Chassid came to the Baditchever asked him what his mother's name was. He said he forgot to ask because he was running. So the Baditchever said, Shnei Zalman Ben, what's his mother's name? He said he doesn't know. Baditchever opened the Chumash. It opened up the Parshas Miketz. Vayar Yaakov ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. Yaakov saw that there's grain in Mitzrayim. Rashi says shever, that there's a good psura in Mitzrayim, because Yosef is there. So the Baditchever said shever, Shneier ben Rivka. That was his mother's name, Rivka. Shneier ben Rivka. Because his mother's name was Rivka, not Rachel. Because it was a Baditchever, it wasn't you and me. Somebody once came by for $, a bocher, with payas, with a round chiddush hat, and he asked the Rebbe why the Alter Rebbe changed in Seder Hachnasas Shabbos his shitta in Shkia. Shulchan Aruch he paskins like the Shulchan Aruch shitta Sagoinim, the second Shkia, Rebbe Tamas Shkia. The Seder Hachnasas Shabbos, he says, don't rely on that Bechlal. You have to follow the Shkia, not the Rebbe Tamas Shkia, but the first Shkia. So he said, why did he change? And it's an Indian of skilla, because if you take out Shabbos early, right, according to the Shulchan Aruch, Shabbos much later. So that's what he asks the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So Rebbe looked at him and said, "Valet, you can't learn and besser vidin and besser v'ich." That was, "Valet, you can't learn and besser vidin and besser v'ich." So he had an avos nefesh to the Baditchever, exactly what the Bacher had to hear. Verstehst? So they had a very, very deep relationship, and b'shas there was even there was some of the Talmidim of the Maggid who had a different chilukei deis with the Alter Rebbe. The Baditchever was fire for the Alter Rebbe. He writes it about Avram Kalisker, what the Maggid said about the Alter Rebbe, etc. So at the end of the Chasana, when it was finished, the Alter Rebbe got into his wagon to go home to Liyadi. So he had a balagola, a Pashta balagola, who was a coachman, and he was his balagola for many, many years. So he knew the Alter Rebbe. He was a very Pashta Yid. And he was a balagola. That's what he did. He would, he was his chauffeur when he had to go in the wagon. So Alter Rebbe looks at this Yid, and when a father says, what do you say about my son? What do you say about my daughter? Wants to hear a nachas report. So he turns to this balagola and he says, "Was sagst auf my mechutten?" What's your opinion about my mechutten? So this balagola was a pashat Yid, but he was around the Alter Rebbe for decades. So he says, "Rebbe, Aye mechutten is pile ployim, aber a Rebbe vi eich is nicht da. Your mechutten is pile ployim. He's wonder of wonders, but a Rebbe like you is not." What's the Havana? The Baditchever was pile ployim. His whole metzias was pile ployim. He was a shtik elikus. He was a shtik avos Yisrael. You saw the Baditchever was something else. They say he once came to a town for Shabbos, and he wanted to stay in somebody's home, the Rav's home. So he asked if he could stay there. So he said, "Yeah, but I heard that Shabbos you jump on tables and you start dancing. I don't like that. It has to be with a Seder Mesuder. So if you make a condition that you're not going to get ecstatic and go out of your kalim, you could stay here. If not, not." So the Baditchever says, "No problem." He made it tonight. Okay. It's Friday night. They make Kiddush, Hamoitzi. And then it's time to serve the food. So the waiter, whoever was Mashamish over there, comes to the Baditchever. He says, "Ich will tashtikel fish." So the Baditchever jumped out of his chair. He says, "Fish will ich? Fish? Ain't soif will ich? Fish I want. Ain't soif I want." And he jumped on the table. And he started to sing. And started to dance. "Fish will ich?" And it was the Baditchever did it. After Shabbos, he went in. I want to ask Mechila. He says, "What are you asking forgiveness?" He said, I breached the protocol. I made a commitment, and I'm sorry. I apologize." So he says, "No, you don't have to apologize." He says, "What do you mean? You made a condition with me." "I meant you shouldn't prepare to do it. It just happens. Aderabbe. I didn't want it to be. Chassidim used to say, V'darashta v'chakarta heite v'hinei emes nachen hadover nesesa te'eva hazois b'Yisrael. You know the word. V'darashta. Somebody gives a drasha. You say, v'chakarta heite. It's a good drasha. It's a lot like the research. The drasha is a heite. It's a gewaldige drasha. V'hinei emes nachen hadover. It was all prepared. Nesesa te'eva hazois b'Yisrael. This is a te'eva. This is an abomination. Emes nachen hadover. I'm not telling you shouldn't prepare. You're allowed to prepare. It's beseder. But the nekuda was, it's a prepared drasha. Nishdas is that's not plugged in. That's not plugged in. Plugged in is you let the electricity flow. So he says, I didn't want you to prepare for it. It happened spontaneously. The Baditcher was Pile Ployim. What this Balagola was saying is, this Pile Ployim, the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe was Teres Chassidus Chabad, Chachma bin Adas. To take Elikus and it should go to the Kishkas. It should go into the Nefesh HaBahamas, into the Guf. That the person becomes one. To take in all the parts of the person. And to be able to allow the person in Olam Haza as a manifestation, as an embodiment, with everything that comes with the physical world, to be able to remain plugged into Ein Sof every moment of the day. That's what a real Rebbe is here to teach. To teach every person how they could be that channel. And that's why the Alter Rebbe had so much Mesiras Nefesh, and he wanted everything to be explained. Why? A lot of his Chavedim felt it was not the right thing. You could see from the other Svarim of Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, they're all so holy, but it's always nitzutzis, it's like sparks. Beautiful vertlach, a vort on the Parsha, a vort on Yom Tov, and it hits the spot. If you have edelkeit, it hits the spot. If not, it doesn't hit anything. It's madreges, mit klippes, mit sviris, mit weites sviris, mit mer madreges. So it may not hit anything. It's just more musar about how you're supposed to be holy and you're not holy, and you're bringing more klippes and you're bringing more sitrachera. So it's not hitting the spot. But Alter Rebbe, everything was with harchava. Why? Elikus is not chachma bin adas. Elikus is Ein Sof. But Alter Rebbe knew very well there may be a generation where you're not going to have Rebbe Yitzchak of Baditchev to look at how he davens. You're not going to have the Chayz of Lublin. You're not going to have Rebbe Zusha of Annapola. You're not going to have the Koshnitz of Magid. You're not going to have the Rebbe Nachum of Chernobyl. Or Kayotze B'zeh. When you saw them, you saw people that their Emunah was revealed, and the Neshama was revealed. It touched you. It could not touch you. So your own Neshama came out. So Alter Rebbe took Chassidus and Kavayachal, he made it a system. Most probably made it a system. He wanted that the Nefesh HaBahamas should get it. It should become yours. You should be able to live with it. So 225 years later, after Yutas Kislev, when sometimes you look around and you don't see a Rebbe Yitzchak of Baditchev, to put it mildly, what's left? So the cynicism that exists is only because we don't realize and recognize the atzmiyas, the amitiyas, and the pnimiyas that was revealed with the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid and the Alter Rebbe. And that's very, very big tragedy. Very big tragedy. So now we need Yafutzah Meinesecha Chutzah in the Olam HaChasidim. Chutzah outside of the Chassidim has already accomplished a lot of it. Mekendach Zayin Mer, I'm sure. But now you need Yafutzah Meinesecha Chutzah in the Welt of Chassidim. They should also know the Mayonis of Teres and Baal Shem Tov. And today it's not in a situation, people are afraid. I'm not a Chabadnik. Ich bin a Skverer, ich bin a Belzer, ich bin a Bobbewe, ich bin a Kloisenberger, ich bin a Gerer, ich bin a Zanze, ich bin a Sadigerer, ich bin a Ruzhener, ich bin a Toldes Aren, ich bin a Toldes Avram Yitzchak, ich bin a Satmere. Today all this is completely irrelevant. If you don't believe me, you can ask Hamas again. Somebody asked me here in one of the shiurim, in 100 years, which movement of Judaism is going to win? Which movement is going to succeed? Is it going to be the Litvisha? Is it going to be the Yeshivish? Is it going to be the modern Orthodox? Is it going to be the Lubavitch? Is it going to be the Satmar? Is it going to be this Chassidus, that Chassidus? So I said, you're missing the whole point. You're missing the whole point. The moment I'm still in that space, it's color war. So who's going to win color war, the red team or the blue team? The place of victory is when Ein Sof is going to win. The Dan Notzach is when goodness is going to win, when Elikus is going to win. That's who's going to win. That's who Elikus is going to win. Einoid Malvada is going to win. Love is going to win over hate. Truth is going to live over falsehood. That's who's going to win. The moment it's going to be color war, my team won color war, so I'm back in my ego. My team won, not your team. Why do I need my team to win? So I should be able to feel good about my ego that my team won. So then I'm the biggest loser. The winner becomes the loser. You know, it's like in couples therapy. When the husband says, I'm going to come out of therapy winning. Achenveh, you're going to come out the biggest loser. The Dan Notzach, not the Di Notzach. I just came in this moment. I wasn't prepared. So nicht gewähnt noch in Adover. The husband says, I'm going to come out. I'm going to prove her wrong. You're going to admit that I'm right. Maybe, but you're going to be the worst loser. What are you going to be left with? You're going to be left with, I'm right and you're wrong. Baruch Hashem, now we have Shalom Bayis. You don't exist and I exist. The same is true with Klal Yisrael. Exactly the same thing. I'm going to win, you're going to lose. You're going to win, I'm going to lose. So who's going to be the biggest loser? The winner is going to be the biggest loser. The first letter that Rebbe wrote when he came back from Petersburg, it's printed in Tanya, is Katointi Mikola Chasadim Mikola Amas. Now Rebbe says, why Katointi? Katointi means I became small. Why did you become small? Somebody does you so many favors, you feel better. Why Katointi? So the Rebbe says that's the difference between Avram and Yishmael. It's a difference between Kedusha and Klippa. Yishmael, the more you give him, the more arrogant he becomes. And Yaakov Avinu, like Avram Avinu, the more you give him Katointi. And he says, why? Because whenever Hashem is Megala himself to a person through Chesed, so his Lashon is, Kol HaKodev Kodev Yoiser, Yoiser Keloi. The closer you are to Ein Sof, what happens? You become smaller and smaller and smaller. And when you're mamish by Ein Sof, you disappear. Not you disappear because you're a shmata. You disappear because you're a channel for infinity. Because katointi, the ego becomes small. Because you're part of the true greatness. Not you disappear because you're a shmata. It's because now you're a channel for the source of light. You're much bigger than you. So katointi. And what does he say? He says that now that we saw these chasadim of Yutas Kislev, so he says, Hineni, I'm warning everybody that they should not look at the misnagdim and make fun of them and mock them and put them down and whistle at them and tell them, we won. This was his message after Yutas Kislev. Now you could understand this man suffered a lot because of certain people. He didn't suffer a little bit, he suffered a lot. He was almost killed because of a Mesirah. And here's where you see the emesdikait of Chassidus. In such a moment, he never got unplugged. He never went into a place, I'll show those lowlifes. A lot of them were taka lowlifes, trust me. Not everybody. Some were Heilige Eden. But some were mecharcherei, despicable people who succumbed to the Yetzer Hara to do what they could do. So you would think, at some moment, you let go, yeah, show them, Here you see what elikus is. Here you see the edelkeit, the purity of a person. And then he wrote letter after letter, remember there are brothers, love them, love them, love them. And ultimately, Yar Aleim, the emes is going to come out. And they're going to know the emes, everything is going to come out. Everything will be true. Don't go into a place of hate. The Gadlus HaNefesh, there was even one of the maskilim, The Maskilim hated Chassidim more than anybody else. One of the Maskilim writes, he says, this letter from the Alter Rebbe, here you see what a great person is. It's such a letter you won't find in anyone's literature, the Gadlus HaNefesh. And the reason he could be like this is because he was plugged in. When you're plugged in, you could be like that, because I'm not going to allow myself to go into a place of nekama and hate. You know why? Because it's not just the other person is going to lose. I'm going to lose. He did what he did taka. And does he have to do tshuva? They have to do tshuva. They have to do tshuva. And the one who mastered, ultimately he became a poor man. He was the Rav of a big city, the Rav of Pinsk. His name was Avigdor, Rebbe Avigdor. He threw out the Baditchev. I mean, he did a lot of things, this guy. He had an interesting resume. At the end of his life, he became a shik, he became an alcoholic, and he became a beggar. And they say that he used to go Yutas Kislev to Farbrengens, because he wanted to drink. And he would say, you have to thank me, give me more. Because of me, you have Yutas Kislev. You hear? Because of me, you have Yutas Kislev. Then his schar was that his grandchild became a very big chassid. He was a Rav, he was a makusha to the Rabbeim. The Alter Rebbe would refuse to go away from that place. And the same thing I saw by the Rebbe all the years. The Rebbe suffered, the Lubavitch Rebbe suffered from terrible opposition. And for what? Everything he did, somebody had to oppose. It was half of a fella. Mamish Maisa Satan. You would think, huh? What? Whatever. Especially it came to the Sugya of Eretz Yisrael. The Sugya of Eretz Yisrael is one of the most painful things. Why? From the 6-Day War, the Rebbe almost at every Farbrengen spoke about Eretz Yisrael. When I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, there was almost no Farbrengen that the Rebbe didn't spend a half an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, to talk about the situation in Eretz Yisrael and the mistakes that are being made. And I used to wonder, there's 5,000 Chassidim. They're not military people, they're not government people, they don't even know what he's talking about. It's Chanukah, talk about Chanukah. Purim, Yud Beis Tammuz, Yud Tes Kislev, Shabbos Vayishlach, Shabbos Chayisara. And it was almost like the Rebbe, it burst out. So he spoke for hours about Chanukah, Purim, Yud Tes Kislev. But then at some point he would start talking about Eretz Yisrael. And one of the main points he would make almost every Shabbos was that they're making a terrible, terrible mistake. They don't realize that they are surrounded by people that want every Jew dead. If they had the ability, they would do exactly what the Nazis did. And when you have a snake, you have to cut off the head of the snake. If you don't cut off the head of the snake and you let it be, it's going to come and bite you. It would be like in 1945, the Americans and the British say, we already bombed the German cities enough. Let's leave Hitler in this bunker. We already taught him a lesson. And what would happen today? Everybody would be speaking German. And none of them would be Jewish. Those who would be speaking German. Now, the Rebbe was not hawkish. The Rebbe was not a hawkish person. You know what hawkish is? Huh? Wie sagt man auf Yiddish? They all know what hawkish means. Some people, their nature, they're hawks. They're aggressive. We're going to fight. We don't give in. The Rebbe was punkt farke. There was nobody who spoke so much about world peace and Mashiach and Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, and that ultimately the whole world is going to be peaceful, and that's what we're looking for and we're davening for. His whole nature was full of peace and love. But it came to this sugya, he said, you have to understand that any compromise you're making that could possibly endanger one Jewish life is Heipach HaShulchan Aruch, and it's going to haunt us horribly. And I remember I was a kid, and he would speak about it for a long time, and he would analyze and explain. And once the Rebbe said, people asked me, was hast du nicht auf? 30 years he started, 30 years, non-stop. And then he said, Ich iba guck und ich seh abchie ledeires. Ich seh abchie ledeires. There were 3 million Jews then in Eretz Yisrael, not 6. Today 6.6, then it was 3. He said, 3 million Yidden in Asakane. Ich seh's. Wie kann ich nicht schreien? Wie kann ich nicht schreien? And he encouraged the leaders privately and publicly, constantly, every prime minister, every general, whoever he could, that their whole way of thinking needs to change. And that they had opportunities time and time and time again to be able to achieve what Hashem needs them to achieve. But they didn't do it. They didn't listen. They mocked him. Nah. What they would do is, you send in a few, so the Rebbe would compare it to a cancer. There's a raging cancer. The cancer wants to kill you. The doctor goes in, starts the surgery, says there's too much blood. And he leaves the cancer inside. He says, don't worry, I got rid of 40% of the cancer. I got rid of 90% of the cancer. You know what the end of the story is? Guy is dead. You don't make peace with cancer that's trying to kill you. You can't. You leave a few cancer cells, boom! Rahman al-Islam. You have to cut off the head of the snake. Yisrael did not do this for a few reasons. First of all, they did not read reality. They did not understand the reality. They thought that the other side are like Jews. They want to raise their children in peace. They just want territory. They want comfort. They want to play golf on Sunday, eat sushi on Friday, eat cholent on Shabbos, and have a good life. They did not realize you're dealing with a religious war that wants to see every Jew dead, and for them that's the biggest simchas Torah. How many Jews are surprised now by the atrocities? All the Jews. Why are you surprised? What's the surprise? The moment the Fogel family was slaughtered in Itamar Shechted, the whole family Friday night, that's when Israel should have done what they're doing now. Not now. Now they did it to 1,500 people with the kidnapped and the captivity and all the wounded. They did it to one family, you see. Who shechts children? Who shechts children? You heard of somebody shechting children? That's what they did in Tachvetat. It's a difference. This is not a territory issue. But Jews didn't understand that. They said, nah, they're like us. You give them Gaza, you give them Oslo, they also want peace. No. Turek Harta are just paid agents by Iran. That's it. Iran pays them off. They pay tuition from Iran. It's fine. It works for them. Don't take them so seriously. They're Iran agents. I don't think they're Jews. I doubt they're really Jewish, Kalocha. I doubt they're Jewish. I'll be very surprised that they're Jewish. I can't say for sure. I can't open a Chumash and tell you that they're not Jewish, but I'll be surprised. Something is off over there. And it's something is off. It's like somebody marching with Hitler. Something is off. It's not. Something is very off. And then there's also Jews that don't look like Neturei Karta, but they speak the same way. And there's something very, very off with them also. Either they're very sick, or they're still traumatized from the Holocaust. They think maybe we deserve it. I don't know. They're very sick. There's some Jews who are very, very sick. Very sick people. Very sick. You have to have compassion for them, but not tolerate their views, because they're lethal. They're poison. It's pikuach nefesh. The second reason Israel couldn't do it is because Jews are Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim, and they have Rachmanis. The Medrash says if you have Rachmanis to those who are cruel, you're going to be cruel to those that you have to have Rachmanis on. The third reason is the worst tragedy. And that is, because of the lack of Torah, Israel did not feel the moral strength and justification that Eretz Yisrael entirely is our home. If you come to shoot my kids in my home, there's no issue. But they started to believe there's two sides. There's another home here. You had a Holocaust, fine, but you can't take away a home. They started to believe that narrative. They couldn't defeat Sahal through the tanks, but they defeated Sahal through morality. The Jewish people stopped believing that it's their home. And that's why Torah is so important. The first Rashi in Bereshis, they stopped teaching. What's the first Rashi in Bereshis? First Rashi wrote this in the 1000s, and he was in France during the Crusades. There were no 6 million Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. There were a few Jews in Eretz Yisrael. The question was the Muslims or the Christians are going to rule. What does Rashi say? That the whole Sefer Bereshis is extra. Amar Rebbe Yitzchak. Torah should have started in Parashas Boy. Torah is a book of mitzvahs. The first mitzvah is in Boy. The few mitzvahs from Bereshis, you could put in Shmois. Mila, Gid, Hanosha, Pruervu. So why is the whole Sefer Bereshis? It's extra. You want to teach me history? Make a Sefer of history. Torah is lessons. It's halacha. So what does it actually say? From Bereshis till Boy. Why was it written? Zakrashi mishum koyach maisav higid la'amay losas lam nachlas goyim. She'im yoimru umas ha'olam liYisrael. Listim atem shekavashtem atzah shiva goyim. Rashi says one day the nations of the world are going to come to the Jewish people and say, you're a bunch of thieves, you're a bunch of thugs, you are conquerors, you are occupiers, you are colonizers, you are an apartheid state. Listim atem, you're thugs. And Jews are going to say, whoa, you're right. We're taka thugs. So you know what? We'll go back to the 67 borders. That invention was a Jewish invention. None of the Arabs say that. The whole Israel is an occupation. We decided we'll give Gaza and you'll be happy. No! Every point of Eretz Yisrael is ours. Listim atem. The Jews didn't want to accept that because that means you're dealing with a sworn enemy, and they wanted to believe that we could play golf, we could be calm. And the Rebbe said, you're dealing with the head of a snake. Say the truth. This is our home. Not a vestige of terror will be tolerated. It will be cut down mercilessly. You don't put one life in danger. Oh. So Rashi says the whole Sefer Bereshis was written to give Jews an answer. To say Bereshis bara Elokim v'shamayim v'zarz. God created the world. He took one little tiny piece of land the size of New Jersey and he gave it to the Jewish people. That's it. It's a match on a football field. But that match belongs to the Jewish people. Instead, they said the UN gave it to us. The UN also says that Zionism is racism. The chairman of the UN says Israel is being disproportionate. So the same UN, then there's a Balfour Declaration. Balfour is dead many years. And British changed, they made a white paper. This reason, that reason, all reason, but the core is not there. The Muslims are religious people. Allah Akbar, they were screaming Allah Akbar. You have billions of Christians and Muslims who believe in the Bible. The only ones who are afraid to quote the Bible are the Jewish people who gave the world the Bible. That's why Torah is so important. This whole division between those who learn and those who fight is such a, it undermines the Jewish people. Torah is the gibui ruchani. The army needs morale, especially a Jewish army. When a Jewish army doesn't have morale, they're killed. The morale of the Jewish people is the Torah. My son Mendel told me a gewaldige word from Rebbe Elchanan Wasserman in Kovitz Shiur in Parshas Vayishlach. Rebbe Elchanan Wasserman, Hashem Yinkem Dameh, was the Rashiva of Baranovich. He was killed by the Germans, I think July 41, Tammuz Tavshin Aleph. So Rebbe Elchanan says a moededike word. The Gemara says, Alter Rebbe brings it in Tanya, Vitir HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Gilui Arayis Shvichizdam Avodah Zarah V'loi Vitir al Bittul Torah. Hashem was ready to forgo, in the time of the Churban, idolatry, adultery, and murder, spilling of blood, but not Bittul Torah. Frek Rebbe Elchanan, come on. If your son comes to you and says, Tati, I want to quit yeshiva. I don't want to learn anymore. But you know what? I'm not going to kill anybody. I'm not going to do shvichas dam. I'm not going to do gilui arayis. You say, you know what? Those I don't care. Bittul Torah, that's what I care. It's strange. Gilui arayis, shvichas dam, avodah zarah, that undermines the world. It's heinous. It's evil. That was mavate. Bittul Torah not. So Balchanan says, I'm moededike vart. Such a true vart. He gives an example. There were two countries and they were enemies. They were fighting. Each one has an army and weapons, and one country fights against the other one, and sometimes they win the war. They defeat them. Whatever their mission was, they accomplished. He says, but that's not the end of the story. You know why? Because tomorrow, the other country might attack back. It happened that there were wars. One country was defeated. They had to back off. They had casualties, whatever it is, they had to give up territory. But 10 years later, 100 years later, 50 years later, it happens constantly. The nation attacks. 6-day war, Israel won. And then, here again, Israel made a mistake. They right away said, we're going to give everything back. The Arabs didn't accept it. And then they accepted a ceasefire. The Rebbe said the moment the ceasefire is going to start, Egypt is going to prepare for the next war. Everybody laughed. And then came the Yom Kippur War. Lebanon, Begin didn't want to finish in Lebanon because there were 4 mothers screaming. And the Rebbe said, what the people you're living in Lebanon is going to create a pchia l'doiris. Now the sakana of Lebanon with Hezbollah is ein l'shai the Eibishter's loiset. But the Rebbe would always say, al pi teva. But since Yidna alamaylam in teva, so the koyach haTorah and the koyach haMitzvah has incredible power to change reality, and that's why the one sheep can live between 70 wolves, despite the crazy danger. But a Jew has to do things al pi teva. You can't just say there'll be miracles. You have to do things al pi teva. So the Balchanan says, so one country lost the war. A few years later, the other country attacks. He says that's all if the country still retains its army and its weapons. But what happens if the country doesn't only lose the war, the country gives their weapons to the enemy? If the country gives their weapon to the enemy, he says, now the Balchanan says the next war they're not going to win because they're empty-handed, they don't have weapons. Agav, one of the worst mistakes of Israel was they resurrected the PLO, called it the Palestinian Authority. They gave them a police force, and that's when the Oslo created suicide bombers from the police that were trained by the Israel themselves. The way that Rebbe was screaming about these things, I can't even tell you. Every Shabbos, an hour, I could still hear it. And it was nafshe yotze, his whole soul went out. And a moment before, he did a siyum hashas. And then a moment after was a maimer for an hour. And then there was a pilpul in Rambam and a Rashi. But then he would start this sugya and nafshe yotze b'dabra. So the Balchanan says, listen to Balchanan's vart. Gili arayis shrichas dam avodah means the Jewish people lost the war. The Yetzer Hara took over. Gili arayis is horrible. Shrichas damim ve'retnach. The Rambam says there's no avodah like shrichas damim. It's the worst of the worst. And avodah zarah. But he says, but tomorrow the Yetzer Tov may take over. But he says when there's bittul Torah, they're not connected. They're not learning anymore. They don't have their weapons. They don't understand who they are. They can't even fight back. When you don't believe Eretz Yisrael is yours, when you don't understand who the Jewish people are, when you don't understand who the enemy is, when you don't have an answer to listim atem, we're just a regular nation trying to make peace and we want the world to like us. So now you lost your weapon. You lost your spirit. You lost your energy. That's the bittul Torah. Bittul Torah means I don't have a compass anymore. There's no right and wrong anymore. I may do terrible things, but if there's Torah, I have a derech, there's somebody challenging me, there's something motivating me. So the Balchanan's Wort. Shekayach Mendel. Ich habe gesagt gut? Huh? Yeah. And the last thing is, because of this, very, very afraid of what the world is going to say. The Jewish people taught the world morality, but now we're looking to the world to tell us what's moral. They're going to tell us what's moral, what's not moral. Thousands of years ago, most of the nations were still cannibals. They were menschenfressers. They stood in forests and they ate human flesh, and the Jewish people then spoke about not to eat Evim and Achai. When Jewish people start gleaning their morality from people who couldn't care less if there's another Holocaust, so what do you end up? Every move, before I make the move, I have to know if this one likes me and if this one agrees and if that one agrees. And this is not coming from a hawkish perspective. We want to be aggressive and we don't love war. We love peace. We want Mashiach. We don't want war. We want peace. But it comes from a healthy perspective of Habal Laharga, Hashkem Laharga, understanding. For me, this is very, very painful. But obviously, this is the pain of the reality. I grew up, my whole youth was growing up almost every single Shabbos, hearing the Lubavitcher Rebbe speak about this incessantly, with a very clear message. Because he just saw it, he felt it, he saw it with his eyes. Today, you see, it was Mamash Divrei Elikim Chayim, every ice. And he was mocked by people, not just by people in Israeli politics, by other people too, who just didn't have that clarity, that vision. They just didn't have it. It's very painful to be able to see, to be able to watch that. There was somebody in Israel, a commander, and he warned about what's going to happen. So today he became a celebrity. His name is Brick. Everybody wants to know because he warned it. He made a warning once. The Rebbe for 30 years was warning this. 30 years I heard. I didn't hear it for 30 years. I wasn't so old. I wasn't born in 67. But all my years, every Farbrengen, almost, and not every, but almost every Farbrengen, from Acharon Shel Pesach to Yutas Kislev, from Purim to Chanukah, from Shabbos Lech Lecha to Shabbos Parshas Nitzavim. I can't say every, but noch anand. It was mamish divrei nevuah, mamish divrei nevuah, word for word for word for word. It's like it was said today, like it was said Erev Simchas Torah. And yet I come back to this nekuda, but with all of this, always remained with such avas Yisrael to everybody, with such positivity, with such enthusiasm, with such emunah. How do you do that? At some point you have to become an angry person. You start getting resentful to people. That's the katointi mikol chasadim. This is where you see the emes, you see the pnimius, you see what Teres HaGeula is. You see what godliness is. There's never a personal vendetta. It's my ego, which is very normal. Ego is a human thing. I'm upset at you. You got me. I'm going to get you back. We all understand these things. Loisikaim, loisiter. These are human emotions. Ichel deweisen. I'm going to show you. When you have a neshama, that atzilus, a neshama of Ein Sof, that's so plugged in, kol kuloi is emes. So there's no color war, there's no, I'm right and you're wrong and now I feel better about myself. It's not I feel better about myself. It's I love you as much as I love me. I care. I want goodness, I want innocence, I want purity, I want Hashem. That's what I want. And therefore also with all the pain of disappointment, there's never despair, no yiush. Because the moment you're plugged into the source, there's no yiush. Somehow you know that with all the craziness and with all the mistakes that were made, and the b'chia l'doides, Sada Ebershtav the Welt. You know that, and you know it with the same certainty. And that's very powerful. It's not just powerful, it's the source of all the power. It's lo yitosh Hashem amoy v'nachalosei lo yazev. Hishia es hamecha ureim v'nasim adoilam. Lo yitosh Hashem amoy. The captain didn't abandon the ship, ever. Like the Baal Shem Tov said, every nekuda is b'hashgacha, every nekuda. Every nekuda, even the leaf that turns over is b'hashgacha. It's getting its vitality that moment. So that's why we were. This is my brief explanation why we were singing Asheinu Matov Chalkeinu Anoim Gerleinu so many times, because really you could sing it Ad Ein Sof. Levai sheyispal Adam Kol Hayom Kula. We say it taka once in the morning, but when we say it in the morning, Lefichach Anu Chayovim Lahoidus Lecha L'Shabechacha. What's Chayovim Lahoidus Lecha? You don't force people to say thank you. It's not a geschmacka thank you. Yeah, if your wife cooks for Shabbos and she says, if you want the kugel, you have to say thank you. Thank you by definition is voluntary. But what's pshat chayovim in Yiddishkeit? Chayovim in Yiddishkeit doesn't mean I'm forcing you with chains. Chayovim means how could you not? How could you be so divorced from reality? A chiyuv in Yiddishkeit means the ganze Welt schreit as medaf. The ganze Welt schreit. Chayovim is not I'm going to chain you to a bench until you scream thank you. Reality screams, Chayavim Lahoidus. How could you not? The Herst. Aval anachnu amcha b'nei v'risecha b'nei Avram my havcha shenishbat le'bar ha'mediyah. Zer yitzak yichider sheneket Adas Yaakov bincha b'chayrascha Adas Yaakov bincha b'chayrecha Sheme'avoscha sha'ahavta oisai u'misimchoscha she'samachta be'karasa shema Yisrael v'shurn. You ever translate these words? It's not in the popular part of davening. It's karbonis, so I know it's a mitzvah to do it very fast, but it's kedai sometimes to stop for 3 seconds. And even if the chazan is going, 7 on the airplanes, what are they called? The fast airplanes, huh? What do you say, Shema'avad, the love that you loved him, the joy that you had with him, Karasas Shema Yisrael. Lefichach anachnu chayovim lahoidus lecha. The opportunity to be a channel this moment for all the truth and love and light in the world that's channeled. That's what life is. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. Like it says in Tanya Pedek Lamed Gimel. You remember what's my Yafa Yirush Hasenu? What the Rebbe says? Yeah, good. Pedek Lamed Gimel. Okay. Yeah. That's my boy. It's not my credit, but it's my boy. It's my wife's credit. It's my wife's credit. It's not my credit. Yeah. So the Alter Rebbe teaches, what's my Yafa Yirush saying? I'll just translate in English what Mendel just said. If I could, not verbatim. You have a child, he grows up, and one day he finds out that the Zayda left $300 million. Nicht gefährlich, right? Everybody hopes that, yeah? $300 million. And you don't even have a few brothers to give it to. It's all for yours. Nicht gefährlich. So you besimcha. So Alter Rebbe says that doesn't even come close to compare that a Jew knows the Yerusha shein chilanu avosenu, the Yerusha that was left us. What's the Yerusha? Yichud Hashem ha'amiti. Yichud Hashem ha'amiti. It's a much greater simcha. What's that? Our Ovis gave it to us. Yichud Hashem is a metzias. I didn't get it. It's a fact. So Chassidim used to teach in Chilunu Avosenu is the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid. In Chilunu Avosenu, the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid were megala Yichud Hashem ha'amiti. They revealed it. Yichud Hashem ha'amiti is not a Yerusha. It's a fact. The rest. Yichud Hashem ha'amiti, but they were megalit. Yichud is a fact. The Yerusha could be somewhere in a Swiss bank. It's not going to help me. Somebody has to give me the key to the account. They have to give me the number. You know the Maisa with Reb Chaim Kreisvert? Chaim Kreisvert was the chief rabbi of Antwerp. He was from Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin. He came from Krakow. And he survived the war. It's a Moide de Maisa. Reb Chaim Kreisvert had a gewaldike memory. He was a Boki B'Shas. He had a gewaldike zikaron. And there was a Yid who told him he has a lot of money in the Swiss bank and he doesn't think he's going to make it out. So he gave him the information to his account and he said, if one day you meet a relative of mine, give him the information so he could retrieve the money. It's a huge sum of money. The Jew never made it out. And if Chaim Kreisvert made it out, he went there. It's strong. Then he ended up in Antwerp as a chief rabbi. So years later, I think around 25 years later, a schnorrer comes into shul in Antwerp to collect money. And Reb Chaim Kreisvert looks at him, and the poor man seems mamish homeless. His clothes are torn. He's like in rags. And he starts talking to him, and he gives him a dove, and then he says, what's your name? So he tells him his name. And it triggers a memory, the same last name of that Jew who was killed, who gave him the information. So he starts talking to this person, where he's from, who his father is. He says his father didn't survive. So the red lights go, the light bulb goes off in his brain. And he says, where do you live? He says, I don't have a home, I'm a beggar. He says, what are you going to eat for dinner? He says, I collect and I go over to buy a meal. And every night he finds another place. He was not just poor, he was an ani morud. He was a homeless man. So he says, how long are you going to stay in Antwerp? He says, he's planning to stay here for a few weeks. So he doesn't want to say anything, but he needed time to do research. So Chaim Kreisvert takes all the information. He doesn't tell him why he's asking. And then he starts doing his research. This is before the days of Google, so research was a little harder. And after a few days, he decides that he's a son. He's a son of the Jew who was killed in the Holocaust, who had a Swiss account. So after a Chakira Udrisha, and he asks this Jew more questions, he finally spills the beans and he says, Rabbi, I just want to tell you something. You're not a beggar and you're not a poor man. You're a very rich Jew. He says, well, you're a loyag l'rosh, where you want to mock me, you want to make fun of me, he says, no. He says, here's money. Go buy yourself a ticket and go to Basel. From Antwerp, take a train, go to Switzerland. Here's the information. You go to this and this bank, you give them this information, and you're going to retrieve your father's money, and it's a huge inheritance. V'kachava, this homeless man in rags left Reb Chaim Kreisvit to become a millionaire, and not overnight, the same night. So Reb Chaim Kreisvit told over the story, and he said, what did I learn from the story? He said, there could be a person standing in front of me. In his mind, he's the poorest man in the world. And it's true. From his perspective, he's the poorest man in the world. What's the truth? The truth is he's one of the richest Jews around. He just doesn't know it. So that's what I learned at that moment. That's what Alter Rebbe is saying. Ma yofa Yerusha seinu. You can have a Yerusha. Meirasha kilas Yaakov. I don't know it. Some people look in the mirror and they say, I'm a traumatized, dejected, wretched, depressed loser. My parents rejected me, my community rejected me, God rejected me, Yiddishkeit rejected me. Every person I hope that I'll get love from rejected me, and I reject myself too. And they look at themselves and emotionally they feel impoverished. Kommt der alte Rebbes again and sagt, V'nefesh Hashem is b'Yisrael, Ichelek, Eleika, Mimal, Mamish. Daloi poverty. Daloi means enough in Russian. Daloi golus. Daloi. At this moment, you're the richest person in the world. Why? For says, plug in. You have a Chelek, Eleika, Mimal, Mamish. It's not a joke. It's not B'derech Litzonis. It's not a guzma. It's not a drama speech. That's why the Alter Rebbe adds the word mamish. Chelek elekami mal is a pasuk in Iyov. Many Sfarim it says that a neshama is chelek elekami mal. It's not the Alter Rebbe's a chiddush. First time I think it says in Shefa Tal by the son of the Shalah. In other Sfarim, the Arizal uses a similar lashon or that lashon. The Reishis Chachma, most Sifrei HaMekabalim use it. You have it in the Farshei HaMikra. The Ramban says something close. The Klayok, many others. The Rechayim. And certainly Sifrei HaKabbalah. The Alter Rebbe adds one word, Chelek elekami mal, mamish. What's prat mamish? Mekenes untappen. You can go to the bank. Mamish means you can go to the bank. The bank doesn't look at souls. The bank needs money. The bank needs texture. Mamish. It's mamish. You can go to the bank with your Chelek elekami mal. It's real. I may be blocked. I may be so blocked that I can't even believe it. And certainly I can't feel it. That we know. That's why we need healing. We need healing. We need healing. This is a generation of healing. But what are you going to find? You're not going to find a Yerusha that's somewhere else. It's your Yerusha. Yerusha shehin chilunu aveseinu. That's chayavim lahedis. When the moment the person realizes that, there's an expression of gratitude. You say, me, my life is miserable, I have bills to pay, and I have tzadis with this thing, and I have tzadis with this thing. What gratitude? This doesn't take away that a person has challenges that we have to deal with, but it allows you actually to deal with your challenges in a much better way from a place of gratitude. Because when you're in a place of gratitude, you could look at your life, and instead of seeing it as a curse, you see it as an opportunity, you see it as a shlichus. And there's no ego. So when there's no ego, you don't take it personal. We don't take it personal. You can actually be there for your children. You can actually be there for people in pain. Much better because you come from a place of gratitude. If you feel the whole world owes you everything and it's all about my ego, I can't even be there for anybody. I can't help the people in pain. Gratitude means that you could show up with your deepest and best version of yourself. That's the Mayafer Yerushaseinu. Mayafer Yerushaseinu shein chilunu aveseinu yichud Hashem amiti asher afilu ba'aretz mitachas ein oid mulvadoi. That's the Yerusha that our parents gave us. The hest? Huh? Oh, Yerusha, my Yerusha. They used to say mein Kadishel. It's not my Yerusha, it's the Yerusha of Hinchilunu Aveseinu, the Baal Shem Tov, the Magid, the Alter Rebbe, Biz the Rebbe. Yichud Hashem Amiti. The heißt, Ashafilu ba'aretz mitochas ein oid mulvadoi v'zui dirasei b'tachtoina. That's pshat diri b'tachtoina. What does that mean practically? Practically, it means that right now, in this world, right here, when you come home tonight, when you wake up tomorrow morning, you're plugged in. You're plugged in. You're a channel for infinity, for love. Light. There's light coming through you. Just open yourself up. Go into that space. There's machshava zaris. Okay. So we have to figure that out. But don't let that disturb the Yerusha. Fine. Machshava zaris. Imagine you get this Yerusha of $300 million from the Swiss account, right? And the same day the IRS sends you a bill, right, for $3,000. It doesn't destroy it. You have $300 million in the bank. Okay, the IRS, if you're a Jew, you'll hire a lawyer. If you're a guy, you'll pay. You'll figure it out. But you're not going to start sitting shiva because it's fine, you have a bill. So machshava zaris is like they throw a bill in. Okay, fine. But what are you going to let the $300 million go to waste? What's that? You're sitting with your wife, you're sitting with your children, you're in a space of love, of connection. Now you have a machshava zara. Let me get angry, let me get frustrated. The kid didn't do the homework, they didn't finish the masech. So you got a bill from the IRS. Mela. Don't leave the space of love. Don't leave the space of dveikus. Das is the Mayafa Yerushaseinu. The Mayafa Yerushaseinu. Since this is Chag HaGeula, Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, so Hashem should help each and every one of us. We should be able to internalize the Mayafa Yerushaseinu, to live it, to breathe it, to radiate it. Every person in their own way, because Chayav Adam Loimar B'Shvili Nivra Ha'olam. The world was created for me. This line, it's a Mishnah in Sanhedrin, Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches. Chassidus took it seriously. It's not just the world was created for you, so you should think that you're not a nobody. It's serious. Bishvili Nivra Olam is you were chosen to radiate an oil that comes through you. Don't underestimate it. And in one of the Maimonim, the Rebbe Rayat says, Bishvili Nivra Olam is Bishvili Nivra HaHelim. Olam comes from the word Helim. Because of me, the concealment was created. There's a certain concealment that I have to work through. Bishvili nivra helim. There's a certain helim that I have to work through. And only I'm the one who's going to break through that helim and transform it into light. We should be able to live it, breathe it, internalize it, radiate it, and fill the world with it. To fill the world with it. With the oid of Pnimiyas HaTorah, the oid of Atzmus Ein Sof. The oid of Avos Hashem, of Avos HaTorah, of Avos Yisrael. The way we learn Torah, Nigla the Torah, Pnimiyas HaTorah, with an achdus between all the parts of Torah, which creates an achdus between all the parts of Jews, which creates an achdus between the world and the Creator. We should be able to always remain plugged into the source, and then we'll always remain connected to each other. And when we're connected with each other, then a lot of miracles happen. And Hashem should help that the Pada B'Shalom Nafshi of Yutas Kislev should lead us straight into the real and ultimate Pada B'Shalom Nafshi. The redemption of every single Jew in every single way. Of course, all of our captives and those who are kidnapped by the Yamach Shemoiniks, they should all experience Pada B'Shalom Nafshi. And every one of the soldiers should return home and safe. And the leaders of Israel should be able to have the clarity and the courage to know really what to do. Al Pi Teva. And every one of us should rise to the opportunity to be able to not only strengthen ourselves, but to become the most powerful and greatest Jews ever. Sayin Torah and Sayin Avodah and Sayin Gemilas Chasadim. And Sayin Avos Yisrael and Sayin Achdus Yisrael. And dafka with simcha and with amunah and with betachin and with fortitude. And we should see Yeshua's Hashem and the nechama of Tzion v'Yerushalayim and the ultimate geula shlema, not only b'mheida b'yameinu, but takateka from miyad mamish now. L'chaim, 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 l'chaim. I want to thank our musician again, Rabbi Yochanan Riss, Reb Chani Riss, and our vocalist, Chani G, Rabbi Yochanan Goldman from South Africa. Elchanan Goldman. Elchanan and Yochanan. Two nuns in both of them. The Gemara says two nuns is Nisei Nisim. The Gemara in Brachas, yeah? That's Likud the Torah Parshas Nosei from the Zloben Achasana, yeah? The Langenon. Ah? Heint. As a therapist, yeah. As a therapist, that is a therapist. Yeah. As a choshev a psychotherapist, no? Psychologist. I'll tell you Geschmack Meise to conclude. It's just it gives perspective. The Rebbe Marash once said, the Rebbe Marash was the son of the Tzemach Tzedek, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Reb Shmuel. So he was a big expert in medicine. In fact, he knew Latin. He studied medicine, he knew Latin, and he would write prescriptions. He was a big expert in medicine, besides being a Gaon Olam. So the Rebbe Marash once said, there was a doctor, a chassid, the Chabad chassid, his name was Rebbe Avram HaRoife. So Rebbe Marash said like that, Ich bechlal halt nicht von Doktoren. I'm not into doctors, weil sie kaum wissen a krank. They barely know what's going on in terms of health. The only doctor I like is Rebbe Avram HaRoife. You know why? Because he knows that he knows nothing. He knows that he knows nothing, not about medicine. He doesn't know anything. But he's considered a doctor. So patients come to him, and they want advice. Now, to say what he really thinks, that I know nothing, so he's going to lose his whole parnasa, and nobody's going to come back. But he doesn't want to lie and say, I do know, and I'm an expert and a professional, because he knows nothing. So he can't say the truth because he doesn't want to lose his job. And he can't lie. He's not going to lie because he's not a liar. He's a ish emes. He's a chassid. So what do you do? So the Rebbe had a long bit. So the Rebbe says, I have to machen the bar, trachten, the boine shaloylam. What am I supposed to say? Ich weiß doch gar nicht. So he says, macht schon mit der bar. In Zohar it says that the bit is Yud Gimel mit der Sarachim. So the macht mit der bar is a shemamshich Yud Gimel mit der Sarachim. So Yud Gimel mit Sarachim come into the world. Now when he gives advice, it's already going through the Yud Gimel mit der Sarachim and how the Eibishter that the advice works. That's what the Rebbe Marash said. The same is true about a good therapist and a psychologist and a psychotherapist. Verstehst? First thing is, ich weiß gar nicht. And what I'm going to do, a textbook? You're a narcissistic personality disorder. You're borderline personality. You're bipolar order. You're clinically depressed. Your mother made you this. Very often the therapist is projecting what his mother did to him. He's projecting on the other person. Oh, so the erste Sache darf machen mit der Bart. Nicht der Größe, als einer Kleine. Okay? What am I supposed to tell this guy? So just let's be mamshach give him this erach. Let's go into a place of love and empathy and truth and bittul and humility and dvekus. And yes, the Eibishter wird helfen. I'll be able to help him be megala his nefesh elikis, his chelik elikamim al mamish. And we'll be able to find healing together. It's not, I'll heal you. We'll find healing together. So now you want to know what you have to go 10 years to school. So you have to. That's, say that. Das ist, darf machen akeli. Huh? So zwei Dinge. Darf machen akeli. But that's what the Rebbe Manash says. I like Rebbe Avram HaRoife. You'd give him the sarachim. So I once told over the story, I had to once introduce a doctor for a dinner. It was a big doctor. They were honoring him. So they asked me to introduce him. I knew him, so I introduced him. So I said, the Gemara says in Kiddushin, Toiv sheberoifim legehenim. All good doctors belong in Gehenna. So they got very upset. They're here to honor a doctor, and I'm saying Toiv sheberoifim legehenim. So I said, relax. The Chassidus Shetayich, Toiv sheberoifim is a roife who only believes in Toiv. Toiv is 17. He only believes in 17 brachas of Shmoneh Esrei. Rifa'enu Hashem, he doesn't believe in, because I do the healing. So that roife goes legehenim. So I said, the doctor that we're healing today, if you ever realized, he rolls up his beard. But I once saw him somewhere else, and he had a very long beard. And if you ever realize, you come into his office and you tell him what your problem, he starts caressing his beard. I said, the real reason is because he wants to be mamshech to give him this harachamim. So that's not Toiv Shebereif. That's a Reif who believes in the 18 brachas of Shemona Esrei. Okay, so everybody got excited and they introduced him. So he gets up and he said something I'll never forget. He said, Rabbi Jacobson, I'll tell you the real pshat Toiv Shebereif from the Gehenna. A good doctor is in Gehenna. You know why? Because if he's a good doctor, he's not detached. He empathizes with his patients. He doesn't go to the Gehenna in next world. He goes to Gehenna in this world. Because he feels what his patients are experiencing. So that's Toiv Shebereif from the Gehenna. So Toiv Shebe therapists. Good therapist as well. But that's the Chiddush. How do you go to Gehenna? You go to Gehenna in two ways. You can go to the Gehenna, you become part of the problem. Or you go to Gehenna, yeah, like the story, you know, the anecdote of the Talmud Rebbe. The Talmud Rebbe Shlita once gave an anecdote. He said, what's the difference between a Breslev chassid and a Lubavitcher chassid? So he said, Reb Nachman wanted everybody to have long payas. So in case he has to schlep them out from dark places, he'll be able to schlep them out by the payas. He says, there was once a Breslev. After 120, he came to heaven. They said, you were a Breslev chassid the way you were supposed to be? He says, I tried. Uman every Rosh Hashanah, he says, lav dafke. Tikkun HaKlali, Tikkun HaPrati, lav dafke. He's boided every day, lav dafke. Go to Gehenna. So he goes to Gehenna, it gets hot. And like a good Breslev, he starts screaming. If you ever hear in Tzvas 3 o'clock in the morning, he's boided he starts screaming, Tate, Abu, Rebbe. Reb Nachman hears a Yid screaming, he runs into Gehenna, Hospayas, yeah. Takes the payas, schleps him out. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Matir Asura. The Talmud Rebbe said, then a Chabadske chassid comes to heaven after 120. They say, you are a Chabadske chassid the way you're supposed to be? He says, the way I was supposed to be, I tried. You learned Nigla, you learned Gemara, you learned Halacha the way the Alter Rebbe wanted? Not really. Chassidus, you learned like the Alter Rebbe wanted? Not really. Avos Yisrael, you had like the Rebbe wanted? Not really. Go to hell. No, he comes to Gehenna, it gets hot, and he starts screaming. He starts screaming, Rebbe, Rebbe. The Talmud Rebbe says, the Lubavitcher Rebbe hears a Yid screaming. He's not going to respond. His whole life he responded. So he runs in to see, and he says, Rebbe, get me out of here. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe sees him, he goes over to him. He puts his hand in his bosom, takes out $1, gives him the $. He says, Hatzloche Rabbi in your shlichus here. You should have lots of success in your mission here. Yeah. But it's funny, but there's also a deep message that the Talmud Rebbe was saying. And it's true that it's one of the Yesodis of the Rebbe. It's really one of the Yesodis of Chassidus, but the Rebbe articulated it in a very, very clear way throughout his life. And that is, a person never ends up somewhere. You were sent somewhere. The Musag Shlichus is a musig that the Rebbe was coined it and made it into a worldview, but it's essential. It's essential. The Nekuda what Yosef HaTzadik tells his brothers in Vayigash, Ki lemichya shlochani elakim lefneichem. You didn't end up somewhere by mistake, because your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your teacher, your principal, they may be pirei adam, and they may be mechuyev malchus, and maybe even more. Every person has to do tshuva. Every person has to do tshuva. But you are not a victim of another pera adam. You're not a victim of another pera adam. You were sent. You say, why was I sent there? So the real answer is, because when you face adversity in the eyes, when you face it in the eyes, when you're not scared of the Malach HaMavis, when you say, my soul is bigger than you and stronger than you, I'm not scared of the Malach HaMavis, and you face adversity in the eyes, and you emerge triumphant, you're going to be able to bring healing to the world that is unprecedented. So you say, why did I have to go through this? I don't know. It's a good kasha. Put it into the list of questions that we spoke about before and deposit it to the creator of the world. So it's another kasha you have, a good kasha. I don't know. I also don't know why I live today, why somebody else lived 100 years ago, why what happens. I don't know. And I don't know why this and this happened to me or to happen to another person. What I do know is how I react to it. Am I a victim or am I a shliach? If I'm a victim, I'm miserable. If I'm a shliach, I'm empowered. It doesn't mean there's no pain. Gehenna is a painful place. There's a Chassidish word. It says in Pirkei Avos, "Az panim legehennim uboishes panim leganeden." Means a chutzpinyak, a chutzpah guy they sent to Gehenna, and somebody who's boishes panim, somebody who's shy and edel, they sent him to Gan Eden. The Chassidim Taitcha say, "Az panim." If you have chutzpah, if you have strength, then you could go on a shlichus legehenna. Boishes panim, those who are embarrassed, they have to stay in Gan Eden. They have to stay in Gan Eden. They have to stay in nice places with air condition. As panim, you have taikif. You sin. The reason you were sent into Gehenna is because you're an az, because you have ois. Ois v'chedv b'mkaimai. That's why you were sent there. Who were going to send to Gehenna? A weak, spineless person? You. Not only that, the reason you were affected so badly is because of your greatness. If you wouldn't have been such a sensitive child, if you wouldn't have been such a loving child, you wouldn't have experienced betrayal the way you experienced it. It's because you're such a powerful neshama that you had what you had. Don't you realize? So now take that power and transform it. Transform your darkness. It's your power that caused it. If you would have been a tough, cruel, selfish, rough person, you wouldn't have experienced this type of abuse. You're sensitive, you're sweet, you're full of love. That's why it happened to you. You trusted. You trust. You're a man of trust. You're a soul of redemption. That's why it happened to you. Don't you realize? It's the greatness. Al tigoi b'mashiachai elu tinaykas shel beis Rabban. You're a stikl Mashiach. So now realize that. Once you identify your strength, this dirt, doesn't belong to you. It's the abuser's dirt. It has nothing to do with you. Was hat es damit mehr? You're completely above it. It doesn't even pass for you to talk about it. You tell me, Pastor, 40 years I'm suffering, 50 years I'm suffering, 60 years. You're suffering, but it's a pastor nish bechal to talk about. You're too good, you're too pure, you're too holy. This is dirt, this is filth. Talmid Chacham shenimtze revav al bigdei. It's not shaykh to you bechal. You're not a dirty person, you're a clean person. The tragedy is you internalized it. You thought you were the dirty person. So now you need healing. But once you're going to be a little healing, you'll see the truth. Nothing to do. Go do. Lehevel v'larik. There's a minig by some. Lehevel v'larik. They spit. Why? Because sometimes you have to out of my system. You have nothing with me. You have nothing with me. Don't even get close to me. I'm done. That's what forgiveness means. Forgiveness doesn't mean you're a weak shmata. Forgiveness means you're not going to control my life for even one more minute. You're done. We're done. The Eloi control, you're not controlling my life. The lack of forgiveness means you're still controlling my life. You're still ruining me. So how can I forgive you? Forgiveness means I'm done with you. You control nothing. Sarisim elikim ve'manoshim vatuchol. You were sent to Gehenna because you're infinitely strong. That's the issue. Now, for 40 years, you didn't realize that. For 40 years, you thought you were guilty. For 30, 40, 50 years, you thought you are Gehenna. So now you know the truth. Now that you know the truth, that you were sent there in order to take out all the sparks and to put it on fire and send the Gehenna to Gehenna. Boom! Out of my system. It says in Tanya Perek Yud Beis, what's the lashon? V'lachen k'sha'oila Mendel Perek Yud Beis. He's not going to show off so much yeshes in one night. Trust me. Now, the Rebbe says there's sometimes oila me'alev l'moyach. Sometimes from the heart comes up a thought, kina, sinna, tina. Grudges, resentment, hatred, negativity. So the Rebbe says, doicheyu b'shtei yadayim. What's doicheyu b'shtei yadayim? People think doicheyu b'shtei yadayim means repression. It doesn't mean repression. It's a very deliberate, conscious choice. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not going to accept you. You're not going to run my life. I'm not living not in jealousy and not in hatred and not resentment. I'm not so small that you're mishagas and not going to control me. Atkan. It's not repression. It's conscious deliberation. Who am I and who am not? It's not who I am. It's inside of me. Yeah, a person has parts. We don't have a mono brain. We don't have mono brain. We have a lot of parts. Kiyadua. Nefesh Elikis, Nefesh Bahamis, Nefesh Achiyunis, Nefesh Ativis. There's a lot of different parts. So when a person realizes this, so we say, Azoi, Toiv Sheberoifim Legehenim. The best of therapists is the one who knows how to go in with the person with empathy, but they don't go in as a victim. They go in as a shliach. When you go in as a shliach, so shliach in halacha, shliach oisa shliach. So the therapist could make the patient also a shliach. Shliach oisa shliach. But it's only if I go in myself. If I stay on top, I'm in Gan Eden, means you're boishas panim. Go get another job. I saw a letter that Rebbe once wrote to somebody, a therapist. He lived in Israel, I think in Tzfas. Apparently he wrote a very scathing letter to the Rebbe about somebody, very negative. So the Rebbe wrote to him, and this was really not the style of the Rebbe, so obviously there was something very real that he felt. He said, judging on your letter, what you wrote about a person you never met, you know nothing about him, you never even discussed it with him, and yet you reach these conclusions, being a therapist is not the job for you. Not only that, you should not be dealing with living people, and you shouldn't even be dealing with living animals. Your lack of sensitivity is not fear even for the animals. You should get a job in things that are lifeless. For example, he says, you can either do farming or deal with rocks or become a librarian. That's what he says. It's a fascinating letter. As I never saw such a letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's not, his letters are usually so encouraging and uplifting. You have the koiches. But apparently it was so fascinating. He said, you write that you're a therapist and it's really a dangerous job for you. Because the Rebbe understood such a person projects all his toxicity on the patient. You have therapists who are really not worked out people. So they may have a churban in their shalom bias, so they start convincing their patients that their marriages are falling apart because their marriage is falling apart. You also have therapists that don't have any real relationships, and they like the patient, so they want to be close to the patient, so they make sure to isolate the patient from everyone else in the world, so they become their God. It's churbanus what happens. And nobody knows it because it happens behind closed doors. The patient is vulnerable. And that's why these types of jobs, you have to be so authentic. You have to work on yourself so much. You have to be such a real person because you're dealing with souls that are vulnerable. You have to have boundaries. You have to completely know when your bias is mixing in. You have to have tremendous bittul. And you have to know the most important thing, that people are not textbooks. You don't put a person into a textbook. Because I need to have a diagnosis. I don't need a diagnosis. The most important thing to know is I don't know. I'm open. I'm going to listen. I want to tune in. I want to be empathetic. I want to connect to you. That's the story of the Mittel Rebbe. Yeah. Yeah. How do we get into Gehenna? Why am I talking about Gehenna? Ich hab vergessen. Oh, a good doctor. A good doctor. So a good doctor, yeah. So every person in their own life has to know where I am was not a mistake. I was sent. And I was sent to have a shlichus there. When I'm in a place of gratitude, I could fulfill my shlichus there. Because when I'm in a place of gratitude, I know that I'm here, it's not by mistake. And right now, Hashem chose me to be in this position, to be able to be a source of light and inspiration. The moment I go in to making other people's cheshbonos, what they think about me, what I think of them. They're good, they're not good, they should be good. You're disappointing me, you should be like this, you should be like that. What happens is I'm disconnected from my own power, so I can't even be there for them anymore. L'chaim, Hashem should give us all the courage and the confidence. Lilmoid, l'lamed, lishmar v'lasas. Ulakayim is called divrei salmo teresecha ba'ava v'yachid levaveinu la'ava l'yiras shmecha v'loy nevosh v'loy nekalim v'loy nekasha loylam vod. We shouldn't be embarrassed for eternity. Asks the Alter Rebbe in the Kudatayr, I think Parshas Acharei Mos. You shouldn't be embarrassed for eternity. Why should you be embarrassed for eternity? So the Alter Rebbe says azoi. Loylam vod for eternity means there's going to be soon a time that Sovev Kalalman is going to be revealed in the world. And then you shouldn't be embarrassed. will I be able to face Seif of Kalalman and not be embarrassed? The only way, what's the embarrassment? The embarrassment is not that I stole money from you. Huh? Toiflachs is Bashem. I shouldn't be embarrassed in simple English, when you face God, you shouldn't have to be embarrassed. That's a very deep prayer. Because it means when you face real truth, when you look in the mirror for real, when you look in the mirror without all the clippers, I shouldn't be embarrassed. I should be able to say Hineni. The only way we can do that is if you learn Chassidus. But not enough to learn. Internalize it. Viscerally. Dama basa kipsada. The Tzemach Tzedek once said about his father-in-law, the Mittler Rebbe, the son of the Balatanya, that if they would cut his finger, what nicht gerunnen Blut, what gerunnen Chassidus. If they would cut the Mittler Rebbe's finger, instead of blood, Chassidus would come out. So I once heard from the Rebbe of Farbrengen, Shabbos Vayetze, Tes Kislev, the yard said of the birth of the Mittler Rebbe. Erev Yud Kislev, his Chagul, he said, what's Pshat? It looks like a Malitza. So Tzedek said he was so into Chassidus that if he cut his finger, blood wouldn't come out, Chassidus would come out. Then he said, no, he meant it kipshute. Why? What is Chassidus? Chassidus is not ideas. Chassidus is not words. Chassidus is Leben. Ki adamu anefesh. It's not that blood wouldn't come out. Blood would come out, but what was the definition of blood? The definition of blood was Chassidus. Chassidus is not a psat Torah. It's life. It's living life. It's being in touch with the oxygen of existence. The blood is going to be Chassidus. Not instead of blood, it'll be blood. But what is blood? Hadamu anefesh. That's what's pshat. It becomes the person's life. Ur v'chayis nafshenu niten lanu. L'chaim, 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 l'chaim. Somebody sent it to me. The answer to the therapist. Somebody sent it a few months ago. Hashem chawo asisi awalei v'isha Hashem asisi awalei v'isha le'elam Hashem asisi Hashem chasis Alei v'shalei Eilam Hashem chasisi 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 alei v'shalei Eilam la 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 la, ay la 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 la, ay 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 ay, ay la 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 ya ya, ay la 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 ya ya ya, ay la 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 ya ya. Becha Hashem chasisi, alei v'shalei Eilam. Becha Hashem chasisi alei v'shalei Eilam Becha Hashem chasisi alei v'shalei Eilam Becha Hashem chasisi alei v'shalei Eilam I did it la 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 la. I did it la 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 la. I did it la 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 la. Hey! I did it la 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 la. I did it la 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 la. I did it la 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 la. Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam 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 Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, yam bam bam bam. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Becha Hashem chasisi. Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Hey, hey, da la la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, ay 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 ay. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, Becha Hashem chasisi. Levei shali elam Hashem chasisi. Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali Hey, hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, bam bam bam. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali Hey, yam bam bam. I did it bam bam. I'm did it bam 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 bam. I'm did it bam 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 bam. Hey, Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem Levei shali elam Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, da la 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 la. Hey, ya 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 ya. Hey, da la ya 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 ya. Hey, da la ya 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 ya. Hey, da la ya 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 ya. Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Hey, da la ya 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 ya. Hey, da la ya 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 ya. Hey, da la ya 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 ya. Hey, ya 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 ya. Hey, da la bam. I'm da la bam. I'm da la bam 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 bam. Becha Hashem chasisi Levei shali elam Becha Hashem chasisi
Al yevoy shulei oilam Hashem mosisi Al yevoy shulei oilam
Hashem Levoy shulei oilam Hey, ay la 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 la, my la 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 la, my la 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 la. Hi, hey, yam bam bam bam, bam 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 bam. Bam 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 bam. Hey, becha Hashem
mosisi
Levoy shulei oilam becha Hashem
mosisi
Levoy shulei oilam Hashem
mosisi
Levoy shulei oilam becha Hashem
mosisi
Levoy shulei oilam
Hashem mosisi
Bam 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 bam
yevoy shulei
bam 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 bam. Hey, hey, la 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 la, my la 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 la, hey, la 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 la. Ay 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 ay, hey, la 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 la, my la 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 la, hey, la 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 la. Hashem. Repression, madoilo. Ay, Hashia, Esamech.
did it, la 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 la. I did it, la 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 la. I did it, la 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 la. I did it, la 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 la. La 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 la. I did la 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 la. I did it, la 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 la.
Hoi, hoi, hum. Hoi, hoi, hoi. Zeg geloof, ja, zeg je wat. Zeg me oh, zeg geloof, ja, zeg je wat. Zeg me
Ya la 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 la. Ay, ya ya. Ay 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 hey. Ay ay ay. Ay la 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 la. Ay. Ay ay ay. Ay did it. Ay 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 did it. Ay 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 did it. Ya la 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 ma. Ay ay ay. Allah sallah. Allah sallah. Allah sallah. Vayetzumayim. Allah sallah. Allah sallah. Allah sallah. Ach vayetzumayim. Aha. Hey. La 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 ma. Ay 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 ay. Hey ay. Ya la 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 ma la 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 la. Ay 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 ay. Hey ya la 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 la. La 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 ma. Ay ay ay. Hey ay ay ay. La 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 la. Ya ay ay ay. Allah sallah.